Hi, my name's Will Erickson from momentumgroup.tech. I'm going to talk a little bit about scalability in Bubble. So often people come and they ask, how do I build a scalable app? They might ask questions like, how many users can a Bubble app handle? How many rows can the database take? How many workflows can run simultaneously? And there are no hard limits to these questions. So from the perspective of Bubble limiting you or charging you per row or per workflow, at the moment, there is no restriction. Um, but the answer really is a little bit different to just giving you a number here. So, obviously in Bubble, you can upgrade the plan and you can get more capacity. But really, the way that you build scalable apps in Bubble comes down to how you architect your app. In fact, you might find you can be on a lower plan if you build out your app really well. What I like to think about is that scalability is achieved through hundreds of small decisions that you make as a developer. Everything in the world of web is a micro interaction. It's a micro interaction between the server and between the user's browser. So there's data being passed to and fro. And if we can make those interactions small and optimized, then we can have a very, very performant app that can work at scale. And working in Bubble is no different. You might have heard about things like read intensive or write intensive scenarios. And it's good to think about what kind of app you're building. For example, if you're building a social media platform, you're going to get lots of people reading content. You need to load that content quickly. You might have other scenarios where you need to write data regularly or more intensively. But I guess a way of visualizing this is imagine you were designing a library. So you've got people that need to access books, and then you've got a librarian or a number of librarians who run to and fro and go and get those books. And so in Bubble, it's much like this. We've got a server where our app is hosted and it's sending information across to our users as they request it. So in the library scenario, if you have a very, very long distance between where the books are and where the people picking up the books are, then your librarians are going to have to run a long way to take those books back and forth. And let's just say you have to make them run back and forth and back and forth and back and forth before they can even deliver one book, then you're going to have a much less efficient library than if you have the books close to the people that need them and then you just pass them back by stretching out your arm. So, in the same way, if the librarian has to run to the books and then do a whole bunch of processes at the other end and look things up and organize things and resort things, and then there's going to be a lot more time involved than if they can just grab the book and then take it back. So in all of that example, there's a lot of little micro interactions there. And what we are doing is in Bubble, we're trying to optimize those things to make those faster and make those less effort and make that server work less. And in doing so, we get something that when you add multiple users running those things at the same time, the app will perform at scale. So within Bubble, there's a number of broad areas that I would suggest we need to optimize, and those things would be the page structure, so the number of elements we have on a page, how those elements are loaded, and how they are organized. Our page workflows, so the workflows that kick off when we press a button or load the page. The structure of the database, so how the data is organized. And you might have heard terms like a relational database. You might have heard terms like database normalization. And these are concepts that we really need to understand and borrow from so that we can structure our database efficiently for the reading and the writing that we need to do. Also, how do you organize your styles? And that plays into page structure, and how to organize backend workflows. And so working within the constraints of Bubble and the environment that it gives us, there are many, many ways that we can optimize each of these things. And I'd love to tell you more and more about them. There's another thing that I've been introduced to, which is a really interesting concept, and that is race conditions. So the idea of race conditions is that things work well in the development environment and they might work pretty reliably and they might perform quite well. But when you take your solution out into the real world and you introduce multiple users and unpredictable workloads, it's a bit like an athlete on the race day. You have slightly different performance in the real world because you have to factor in the weather, the crowd, the wind, all these other factors. So think of a bit like that. You've got this race day performance and you need to start to think about, okay, how do we handle that? So it might be limiting the number of workflows that can run concurrently and limiting the load that those workflows are able to run, so that the app is not compromised when one person kicks off a really heavy workflow. So all of this is really interesting, and there's really quite a lot of small ways that we can optimize our apps. And what we do, we cover this in our academy program. So I've developed a program to help people to learn Bubble and to learn it to a level where they could work professionally as a Bubble developer or maintain an application that is scaling up. And so if you'd like to learn more, please consider joining our academy program. Thanks.